Hello guys, this is Alex Julian or Aloysius Anderman here. In this video review, I will be talking about 3 books for the Sesame Street series. This book, and this book. You saw the titles to those books. And these books can be marvelous achievements of entertainment. And at the same time, I feel as if these short stories are too short. And I'll explain why in this video review, which acts as literary criticism to regard Spanish literature. So I let my audience know that I do have some Spanish thoughts on my mind. I just do not know how to handle every single word of Spanish that comes my way, because I am a native English speaker and Spanish is a secondary tongue in my repertoire of Romance language study. Toast to Jack in the Box, of course, for their 75 years of restaurant business. And Sesame Street, of course, has been around for a long time. A very long time. In fact, I think, in some ways, Sesame Street has gone too long in their series of shows. They have gone so far that Sesame Street is becoming a cliche. And these stories, in of themselves, these 3 books I'm reviewing, are cliches with some heavy detail and some heavy pencil work. It gets kind of difficult to keep track of these short stories because they are too short, and it feels like there's something I need to grasp in a context of meaning that is underdeveloped. And these 3 short stories are the kinds of short stories that assume that kids do not like words. As in, like, kids do not like literature. There's that stereotype of kids. That stereotype of kids that's annoying. It's the stereotype that says, oh, kids like to play with toys. Well, some do, many do not. Many kids like to have conversations instead of toys for most of their living lives. And this Sesame Street Spanish literary background is not perfect. I mean, it does have that kind of assumption of a reach to have. In this case, it would be the reach of what it means to have a ladder, what it means to have a chair, what it means to have a window, what it means to have a door, what it means to have a dance, what it means to go to bed, what it means to do those things. Of course, the problem is these stories are so short, I'm starting to wonder if they are trying to have silent pictures in these 3 books say more than what they could really say. And definitely, it does not always help when you have puppets in this Muppet show series doing those kinds of abstract reasonings while being ignorant to an extent of natural reasonings. We are all guilty of this as artists, where at times art can seem too fancy or too basic or too common or too rash or too rude, and it's because of abstract reasonings. You know, because abstract reasonings can get into territories of the human mind that probably in some cases should be forbidden. And definitely that's why it is important to understand what the means to liberty are before assuming them, as in to understand the means before assuming the means. Because liberty is a very touchy subject, it's a very complicated subject, and definitely these puppets on strings are the kinds of puppets in these books that do not show their strings, but they really do have strings. And ironically, these strings have a very restrictive flavor. Maybe there would be too much desperation by the puppets to have fun instead of like thinking about like something important to do. And I know creators of the Muppet shows and the Sesame Street shows have this kind of fancy for foreign cultures, as in different cultures. But do not let that humor persuade you to automatic run of prejudice. Because definitely that is a common error by English speakers who counteract with foreign cultures. In particular, liberal English speakers may think that the foreign cultures are more Spanish than, as in, like, they will think that foreign cultures are more special than they are, more creative than they are, more beautiful than they are, more ugly than they are, more mean than they are. And definitely it's that common human error of, a very liberal error of assuming too much about the extremes of a foreign culture instead of the basic items. And these Sesame Street stories, these three Spanish stories, get to extreme examples without actually expressing enough about the basics or enough about the works. And definitely I know from my heart that New Yorkers like to have the works shown in a cultural presentation. And hey, that is New York's right, because New York is a very big state and a very big city. It's two places at once, and it does get to that kind of territory of cultural outreach, as in to reach out to other cultures. But then again, Sesame Street also has stereotypes about dancing and partying and climbing ladders and sitting on chairs, as if everybody can do these things as naturally as possible. But we all know as philosophers like you and me, if you are still watching this video at this point, philosophers know that it is counterintuitive and a catch-22 that goes back and forth on things we are aware of and things that we are ignorant of. So I have to ask the Sesame Street show creators, what do you want me to take of your colors shown for the puppet display? What do you want me to take of orange, or to take of green, or to take of blue? Especially if we are not sure if all of these Sesame Street characters are absolutely monsters, or instead they are portrayed as abstract humans. And definitely it does get into that abstract territory when it comes to the presentation of puppets as fancy humans, abstract humans, over the top humans. Kind of like, Ernie, Bert, such and such. Of course, then again, there are monsters in the mix that are supposed to be monsters on top of monsters, and yet there's the monster portrayal of the human-like puppets. So it seems like, in some ways, Sesame Street is running into a conflict between the cartoon world and the puppet world, where it's not really sure if it should just be a puppet show or if it should just be a cartoon show. And definitely that has been a contradiction in terms that the Jim Henson Company has been struggling with for decades. Decades they have been struggling with this world where it may be a cartoon or it may be a puppet show. Because definitely abstract reasonings do not specify as to material of the quality, as in the touch, contact, and feel of the persuasion going on with the art displayed by the Jim Henson Company. So, with reading through these stories and with me reading through these stories and thinking like a kid for a while, I give some kudos here and there for the creativity of the stories, but definitely these stories are less like stories and more like rumors instead of stories, because rumors can be like overrunning sentences, as in sentences that go on too long, more longer than grammar could possibly cover with the English literature that we have, and even the Spanish literature, because Spanish literature is a cousin of English literature because it is a European-oriented sort of language. And at the same time, when we get to these Sesame Street stories, we have to ask ourselves, if these are stories really for the Spanish language or really for the Mexican clientele that we have here in the southwest of the United States of America. California, Arizona, and Nevada, if you will, along with New Mexico and Texas and so on and so forth. So, these stories were entertaining, but they were also undergiving and under-deserving, and these books that I bought were expensive. I bought them from Dollar General. I'm going to give them to my nephew who needs more Spanish education, and I give these books 2 stars out of 5. They're not bad books. They just are books that need more knowledge than pencil work. And let's just consider that for the difference between knowledge and experience. Have a nice day.